Hello and welcome to the very final episode of Cold Case Christmas 2024. It's been a wild ride, 28 episodes, 3 bonus episodes this year, because I just had so many cases I wanted to cover. So here we are at our very final case. And this is another one of those head scratchers. I just don't know what to make of this one. This is a 23-year-old young man who went to public toilets in a quiet seaside village in North Yorkshire. And he just disappeared. Completely disappeared. This is the strange disappearance of Stephen Clark. Stephen was born in Colchester in Essex, which is down south here in the UK, on the 30th of August 1969. Now it seems that his family moved around quite a bit when he was little. When he was 2, he was living in Edinburgh up in Scotland. And sadly, he was involved in a road accident at the tiny age of 2 years old, and he was seriously injured by being knocked down by a truck. This left him with some physical disabilities, and his parents were told that his disabilities would be way more profound than they were. And he recovered pretty well. Now, he did live with a severely damaged left arm and also some damage to his leg, which meant that he walked with a limp. But although he did have some physical disabilities, he was just getting on with getting on. Stephen's sister Victoria, who is only 14 months younger than Stephen, recalls to the Mail Online that she never knew Stephen without his disability. And she says here, "My parents were told he would never walk or talk. That sort of life for him was over, but against all odds he recovered really well. And a lot of that is down to my mum and dad and the amount of help they gave him in terms of physio and exercise and a really positive outlook." Victoria went on to say that as a family they tried to overcome all of the problems that hit them. In the 1970s and 1980s, you probably know yourself, it was a very different world growing up than it is now. When Stephen was a little bit older, the family moved to Cambridgeshire, which is in kind of the east-ish, southeast of England. And then the family moved to South Africa, and he spent some of his schooling near Johannesburg. But the family came back from South Africa after about 10 years and lived in Guildford in Surrey, in the south. And then they moved to Marske, which is in North Yorkshire, in the summer of 1991. And that's where the family were living when what happened. And at the time, Stephen was a happy-go-lucky, friendly, well-adjusted 23-year-old. According to North Yorkshire Police, Stephen had a girlfriend. He'd met her at the Rathbone Society, which is in Redcar, only a few miles away from Marske. And this society worked with people with disabilities to improve their employment skills. And Stephen did really well there. On this day, 28th of December 1992, it was a Monday, when Stephen and his mother decided to go for a walk down the beach. Marske is a seaside town, and a mile or so down the coast is Saltburn. The Saltburn itself is high up on a cliff, and it's got a pier, and you can go up these little tram car things to get up the cliff. I don't know whether they went up there or whether they just stayed by the seaside. When both of them got there, they needed to spend a penny. So Stephen went in the gents and his mother Doris went in the ladies. She came out, Stephen didn't. And she didn't feel it was appropriate to go into the gents' toilets. Now, look, I would have just gone in. But Doris didn't feel it was appropriate. Stephen was a grown man. And she just assumed that he'd gone home. So she walked home, found that Stephen wasn't there. So they went out looking for him, and he was nowhere to be found. So they called the police. Actually, Doris and Stephen's dad, Charles, had both been in the police force themselves. So, they expected the police to pull out all the stops to find their son. But I'm not sure how much of an investigation was actually done. But the police did do some inquiries, and some potential sightings were unearthed. There was a sighting of someone who could have been Stephen in Glenside Terrace, which is in Saltburn. Police received a report from a woman who said she saw Stephen on Thursday, 14th of January 1993, so it would have been just over 2 weeks after Stephen went missing, around 5 p.m. And she was looking out of her living room window, and she saw across the road somebody that she thought was Stephen. She knew him by sight because her relative worked at the bowling club, and she knew that both Stephen and his family were members of that club. So she was kind of sure that it was him, but it was dark. So could she have been mistaken? Yeah. It took her until the 22nd of January to report this, but she saw that he was missing in the local media, so she called it in. And she said that he appeared to be with a man aged 50 to 60 years of age, medium build, bald with grey hair around the sides, wearing glasses. Stephen and the man were not talking, and it looked as if Stephen was walking to keep up with him. Because remember, Stephen walked with a limp. But it was dark. Could she be mistaken? Yes. Anyway, a few days earlier than that, on the 3rd of January 1993, police received a statement from someone called Stan, who said that he'd seen Stephen in Redcar, which is like the big town just outside of Marske, where Stephen lived, near the clock roundabout at around 2 p.m. on the 30th of December, so this would have been 2 days after he went missing. He said he saw Stephen walking past the Gazette offices heading towards the town centre. Stan says he was in conversation with a friend at the time, so he didn't catch Stephen's eye, and he reported that Stephen was on his own. But according to Cleveland Police website, it says that Stan was visited by a detective in 1999, and in that discussion he said he hadn't seen the man's face, but he walked in a similar way to Stephen. So again, we don't know whether that it was someone else. What they did note, though, is that no one came forward to say that they saw Stephen at the toilets in Saltburn. And also, no one came forward to say that they'd seen Stephen and his mother on the walk to Saltburn over the beach. Well, it was the middle of winter. I like a brisk walk, and, you want to walk off Christmas maybe. But, people would have been at home with their families. It's the middle of winter. They're not going to be visiting the seaside. So, to be honest, it doesn't strike me as being that odd that no one saw them. But it struck the police as odd, especially given this. Potential witness came forward to report seeing a man who they believe was Stephen between 3 and 4 p.m. in close proximity to his home on the day that he was reported missing, 28th of December. Now, it got dark at 3:45, middle of winter, so it would have put Stephen in Marske before this time. The walk that they went on was earlier on in the afternoon, around 2 p.m. So, had Stephen made it home? It's confusing, isn't it? I don't know about in other countries, but in the UK, cold cases are periodically reviewed by a cold case team. And this was done to Stephen's case in 2020. And the cold case team found an anonymous letter in the police files that had been sent in on the 24th of September 1999. This was nearly 7 years after Stephen had been missing. And it was an anonymous handwritten letter that had been posted to Guysborough Police Station. And historic police records show that at the time the letter was assessed by officers and the information was recorded. 2 months after that, in November 1999, took them 2 months to do this, detectives visited Stephen's home address and had a conversation about that letter with Stephen's parents. And in this letter, it claimed that Stephen was being abused by his parents, that they weren't treating him very well. Detectives reappealed in 2020 for the writer of that letter to come forward, but no one did. What's so important, though, about the 2020 reinvestigation is that 2 arrests were made. Police turned up at Stephen's parents' address and arrested them both. Charles and Doris, who were aged 80 and 83, were arrested for his murder. They were questioned, they were bailed, and they spent 5 days in a hotel during COVID, 2020. And police dug up the entire backyard. They were still living at the same modest address that they had been when Stephen disappeared. Nothing came of this. They were cleared of suspicion in February of 2021. It was like the police were just trying to, I don't know, shake something up. But it was traumatic. These two elderly people. I think the police idea was, well, his mother was the last person to see him. Her son's been missing at the time they were arrested for nearly 30 years. And Victoria, Stephen's sister, said that she was angry. She was angry that her parents became, after all this time, the focus of the police investigation and the publicity that came from it. It's mind-boggling, to be honest. But what it did do, according to Victoria, quoting here, she says, one positive that could have come from all this media attention would have been finding out what happened to Stephen and where he was. But it didn't. All of this negative media attention and still no news of Stephen. She says of the arrest of her and Stephen's parents, it was just horrific, and the whole time I was thinking, I want to talk to my mum and dad, how are they coping? They're in their 80s. It was actually quite a terrifying experience. I was really quite traumatised by it. And I woke up for many, many months hearing the words that the police officers said to me in the middle of the night. It was just awful. And they just went on and on and on about the same thing. I found out later my parents were being interrogated in a police station, and on the basis of what? It was the most horrific situation. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. So they were acting on this anonymous letter from 1999. It's now 2020. Victoria says the letter was addressed to the wrong police force, and they'd even spelt his name wrong. So why was it taken so seriously? It was probably just some kind of hoax, but because this cold case team had nothing to go on whatsoever, they just jumped. Oh, his parents must have murdered him. But what actually did happen to Stephen Clark? And Victoria says, I want to set the record straight. I want people to be searching for Stephen and to know that he came from a good home and from a family that love and care for him and just want him to come back. I would like to say please come forward and just talk about anything you might have seen or anything you can remember about Stephen's disappearance. It doesn't matter how insignificant you think it is, something might make sense and be a lead that can be followed up on. Stephen being missing has left a huge hole in our lives, so anything someone could do to help us find him would be amazing. Stephen Clark has been missing 32 years to this very day. Did he meet someone in the public toilets and go off with them and then was subsequently murdered? Or what? There's just no answers. It's absolutely baffling. Really baffling. It's a real head scratcher. Where did he go? Were those sightings in the days after Stephen's disappearance, were they really him? It's intriguing, but we just don't know. We have no answers. 32 years, zero answers. And to arrest two elderly people after nearly 30 years is crazy. But hey, that's what happened. That's Stephen's story. So I just hope that someone somewhere knows something that could be useful to the police. So I'll leave a link to Cleveland Police's website where you can get in touch with them if you can think of anything. Were you in that area? Redcar area of North Yorkshire in December of 1992. Did you see anything? Alright guys, let me know what you think about this weird, strange case in the comments, and I will see you very soon. This is the curtain drop on Cold Case Christmas 2024. It's been wild.